Namaste and welcome to the Uncrossing. This is our last panel for edition 1, and we are grateful for Pankaj Saxena ji to join us today to take us through the dark ages of Christianity. So, Pankaj ji is an author and a professor at Rashram School of Public Leadership. So, thank you so much, Pankaj ji, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
So, Pankaj ji, we have had Thank you, Pankaji. The privilege is ours. So we've had like three days of intense discussion on various topics related to Christian fundamentalism. So right from church and gender to church and politics to academia, evangelism. There was a lot that we have discussed over the 3 days of the conference,
Yeah.
and I think this is going to be a brilliant way to summarize the entire discussion. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for doing this for us, Pankaj. Please let me know when we are ready for the presentation. I shall share the screen and we can get going.
We can start right.
Sure.
For the sake of better communication, as soon as I start the presentation, I'll switch off my video. My audio will be on, of course.
Definitely. Yes, Pankaj.
Okay. Today we are going to talk about Christianity in the Dark Ages in the sense that what it means when a religious ideology like Christianity wins over a country, over the population of a country. Because we are talking about real threats here. This is not just an intellectual discussion. This is about the civilizational war between two different ideologies and different societies, different cultures and different civilizations. And the aim of Christianity is to ultimately uh, dominate the whole of the globe, all of Earth. And so it is very imperative and necessary that we look into the origins of Christianity, how it conquered different countries, how it became successful, first of all in Israel, then in Europe, and then in Americas, Africas, and now as the Pope has called that the 21st century will be the century, third millennium will be the millennium of Asia, which by which he means that the last two pagan dharmic civilizations of India and China, these are his targets. These are the targets of Christianity in this millennium. So we will start with a discussion of how Christianity progressed after it was first born. Uh, yeah. So first we'll discuss just a little. This talk is not about the belief of Christianity as such, but just in order to understand how it progressed over the centuries, we need to go uh, in the next few slides just a little about what the belief of Christianity is. Next. The first thing which strikes us about Christianity is that it has a very peculiar claim towards one true religion. And by that, it means that every other religion is a false religion. Now, this is not just the feelings of a bhakt, of a devotee, uh, overflowing feelings of a devotee. In India too, in Hindu Dharma too, certain devotees of sects, they never think that other sects are false, but they think, of course, that their sect is superior to others because of their extreme bhakti and devotion towards that particular sect. But never can a Hindu or a pagan think that his way is the only way and all other ways are the wrong ways. And so, in this so-called secular and liberal climate, when people allege on Hindus that how can you think that only you are true? Actually, it is Hindu Dharma which thinks that there are various ways possible, but Christianity and Islam which think that it is impossible that any other path or way can be true. This is embedded in Christianity. This is first and most important belief about Christianity. Next, please. Then, of course, so with one true religion comes the belief of one true God, who is Yahweh. In many starting centuries, even the depiction of Yahweh was banned, like the depiction of Allah now. But later on, it was allowed, or you can say various different artists took the liberty of portraying him. And this God Yahweh, who is called as the primary name is Yahweh in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it is declared that all our gods are not just not gods, they are demons. So if anyone else claims to be, if we give any sort of name, And we have to understand that we are just not talking about entities here. We are even talking about names and ways of feeling God. So it does not mean that there is just one God and there can be various forms of the same God. No. Even if you try to portray God through a different name, through a different form, then it will be a demon and nothing else. Next, please. Of course, with one true book comes the version of one true religion, comes the version of one true book. This is extremely critical, not just to Christians and Christianity, but also for the Hindus to understand. For us, what is important is the entire sacred land of Bharatvarsh. For us, what is important is the entire darshan, which is given in the Upanishads and various other scriptures of Hindu Dharma. What is important to us are all the rivers, all the mountains, all the gods, all the deities, every place that is in the sacred land of Bharatvarsh, along with its scriptures, of course. And even in the scriptures, there is no one scripture having an overpowering dominion over all others, or the only scripture. But for Christians, for believing Christians, Bible is not just the one true book. They are the people of the book, by which it means land is secondary to them. There is no necessary sense of sacred land, but the sense of sacred or holy book is very important. So that is why it is very easy for them to, in first, to be born in Israel, then to jump to Europe, then to jump to Americas. So the sense of territoriality, and now they are trying to jump to Asia, to India and China, is very different with the prophetic monotheism, because they are anchored, their territorial sense and psychology is anchored in the book and not the land. This is extremely critical. This is what Hindus cannot understand, that why are certain Muslims or Christians, when something happens in Europe or Americas, why are they worked up about what happens in Saudi Arabia or what happens in Jerusalem on the Dome of the Rock? Because they have never even been there. They can't even point it out on the world map. And still they take out rallies or even commit violence on the streets. This is because they are connected by and through the book, which they consider to be the most holy thing in the world. So this is extremely important before proceeding on to understanding Christianity. Next, please. And then, of course, the last prophet, the prophet is also one. And the last, before Jesus, before Christianity, Judaism used to have the concept that there can be more than one prophet. And after a certain time, more and more prophets come. But Christianity put, and it is called the seal of prophecy. They have these notions that even prophecy can be sealed. That now there can be no more prophets after Jesus Christ. He is the last prophet. Whatever good or whatever message the God has to give, he has finally delivered it through Jesus Christ. There can be no other prophets. Anyone who claims so is an impostor. So this is, they did not just claim that Jesus was the only Son of God or the only apostle or the only prophet. They said that he is the last one and there can be no more ones. Next, please. And then they have this very binary notions of heaven and hell. Of course, even in Hindu Dharma and Puranas, you will find Swarga, descriptions of Swarga and Nark. But they are not the ultimate destinations of anyone. People go to Nark and then they come back after paying for their sins. People go to Swarga and after spending their good karma, they also come back to this life. So the only way to get rid of this dichotomy, this binary, is to get self-realization. So the Hindu sense, Hindu cosmology is completely different from this. Next, please. And the humanity is divided between two very clean halves, Christians and non-Christians, believers and non-believers. And it is said that on last judgment, Jesus will come, he will judge. And by judging, he just means whoever has converted to Christianity, he will go to heaven. Born or converted in Christianity, he will go to heaven. Whoever is not born or converted to Christianity, who died as a non-Christian, he will go to hell. And heaven and hell are eternal in Christianity. So there are quite imaginative descriptions of hell, that they will fry you into oil. But then there is a limit to any suffering. So if you really do try to fry someone in oil, he will die within a matter of few seconds, if not minutes. And then the suffering will be over. But the descriptions of hell, of Christian hell, are that no, God will provide, Jehovah will provide him another skin, and then he will fry again. And this will continue on and on and on forever. So these are the descriptions of what will happen after last judgment. But here comes the critical bit. Next, please. But Jesus cannot come for the judgment, for the last judgment, until every other person on earth is either dead or Christian. So the last judgment will come when at the last day, because according to them, the world will be ending then. So every person has to be converted to Christianity. Only then the last judgment will come. And then those who have dead, who are dead now, who have died without converting to Christianity, they will also, their souls, so-called souls, will be judged. So this is the imperative behind conversions. This leads the conversion machine, because for a Christian to go to heaven, we cannot exist as Hindus. We have to be converted to Christianity for them to go to heaven. So this is why they tried so hard. This is why they cross 7 seas, go to tribal areas. Many of them get killed, and even then, by fraud, by any other means, they want to convert us to Christianity, because without us converting to Christianity, they cannot go to heaven. So this is extremely critical. Next, please. And hence convergence, it won't stop until everyone is a Christian. Next, please. So we have gone over briefly what Christianity as a belief means. Now we will see the process of why such an ideology wins, how such an ideology wins. I will not go into the Christian theology, which is contained in the Bible and other sources, because it's an endless topic. It's a very vast topic, actually, and it needs various other talks. So I am starting once Christianity is doctrine as a is established, and it is trying to take over. The sects, Christians are roaming in Rome. They are living in Rome. They are living in various other cities of the Roman Empire, and they are now trying to take over Europe. They have come out of Israel. They are still in Israel, but they have come out of Israel too. And now they are trying to take over other empires. And the nearest empire is the great, huge, ancient Roman Empire. And this is what they try to take over. Why Roman Empire became Christian? Next, please. In 300 AD, when Christianity is 2000 years old, according to the birth of Christ that is surmised today as somewhere around 2000 years ago. But until 300 AD, Christianity was actually non-existent, almost non-existent. There were a few thousand or lakhs of Christians who were in Israel and who were scattered all over the Roman Empire in its biggest of cities. But they did not rule any big nation or big country. And certainly they were not very influential in the Roman Empire. At that time, this was the extent of the Roman Empire. Of course, the ancient empires are not like modern nation states, so the boundaries were porous. But this is roughly the map of how big the Roman Empire at that time was. You can see all of northern Africa, all of the African coast, what is now Turkey, what is now Syria, Israel, Jordan, up to the areas of Iraq. And in Europe, France, Italy, what is now France, Italy, the whole of Balkans and various other countries, Spain and Britain. This was the extent of the Roman Empire. Next, please. And it was a pagan empire. Before the advent of Christianity, whole of the world was pagan. Pagan in the sense that certain scholars and people resent the use of the word pagan. It was a derogatory term created by the Christians in order to insult non-Christians of Europe. Pagan roughly would mean what we now mean as in Hindi Gamar, or someone who dwells in the villages and who does not have the sophistication of the civilization. But later on in modern era, the non-Christians or the neo-pagans of Europe and Americas, they adopted this term and started using it with pride. And so it has become a pan-umbrella term, which all non-prophetic monotheistic sects try to use. So pagans just mean, for those who do not, who are not very familiar with it, they are like Hindus, maybe very different, with very different deities. But like Hindus, they worship nature, they worship divinity, spirituality. They work for, they have mystical traditions, they have occult practices, they have meditational techniques and Guru Shishya Paramparas and various ways. Some are less developed, some are more, but there are these techniques everywhere. And they, of course, do not have any of the beliefs which I just told about what Christianity believes in. They do not have these exclusive claims, no such visions of everlasting heaven and hell. So, Roman Empire in Europe at that time was pagan. There was just a few thousands of Christians in Rome. Next, please. And if you read the Christian history of this era, you will read many accounts of how Christians were so-called, quote-unquote, persecuted. Many were martyred, so-called, by the pagans. Like they have the stories in India that how evil Brahmins killed the original Christians of India and then established Hinduism and Buddhism, like the absurd theories they have here. And their narrative about Roman Empire, about pagans, is the same. Actually, they expressed in public such great hatred for Roman deities, for pagan deities, for their customs, their practices. They would rant and rave because it's written in the Bible, all over the Old Testament, all over the New Testament, that all gods except Yahweh, they are demons, they are evil, and their vigrahas, their statues should be destroyed, their temples should be destroyed. And these so-called Christian martyrs would say this in public on public squares. And so sooner or later, authorities would get irritated, and some of them were killed. And that's how they created a victimization narrative, exactly as they are creating right now in India. There is a parallel to be seen with what happened with ancient pagan Roman Empire against vis-a-vis Christianity, and exactly what is happening today here in India. Christians were non-existent in India. Now they are converting through fraud, through in many areas in the Northeast, through plain gunpoint conversions. And whenever a Hindu community tries to put up a defense, their stories are ghastly, sometimes even completely wrong, and invented stories are circulated, and atrocity literature is created. Funds are generated all over the world through NGOs, and by exploiting the vulnerabilities of a democracy and a Hindu liberal society, they keep converting state after state. Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram are almost completely converted. Manipur is on the verge of converting. Only the Meitei tribe is not converting. In Kerala, they are around 23 to 24%. And even more harrowing and more horrible are the stories of Andhra Pradesh, which, according to many accounts, in the past 8 or 10 years, almost 25% converted. And for the first time in North India, they are making a great harvest of neo-Christians in Punjab, taking benefit of the the widespread use of drugs and other things. They are now converting Punjab. Similar, exactly same story was unfolding in 300 AD in ancient Roman pagan empire in Europe, where Christianity was creating a victimization narrative, atrocity literature, by throwing hatred against the pagans themselves, by destroying their deities in secret in the night. And we have seen how in Andhra Pradesh they are now destroying vigrahas of Sri Ramchandra and various other deities all over Andhra Pradesh. Like the Bhadrakali, the great 1200 years old vigraha of Bhadrakali in Godagadavalli in Karnataka was destroyed in secret, in the secret of the night. That is how they would do the similar things in Europe of ancient times. And when the pagans would try to retaliate, they would create these atrocity stories. Next, please. At that time, empire was actually in a weak condition because from the north, invaders were coming. These things keep happening in the history of any society. And what an ideology like Christianity does is that it takes benefit of the internal differences or the external strife that a country or a nation or a people are going through, and then they use it to their own advantage. So the lesson to learn from them here, as we will see, is that you cannot think that they are friends at any point of time, any sect of theirs, because they will use our fault lines and our differences to their advantage and make Christianity permanent and all other these conflicts as temporary. So at that time, empire was crumbling, taking its benefit. Next, please. Emperor Constantine, who he sought to unify his empire, and he thought that because Christianity told about one God, one book, one people, so he thought that it would help him unify the various different sects of Roman Empire. It would help him recreate the glorious days of the heydays of the Roman Empire. And so he thought that any religion like Christianity would do, because the ancient Greek and Roman religion, they were so lenient. There were thousands of gods and goddesses. They never thought about politicizing religion, or mixing politics with religion. They never thought about destroying one sect by destroying their gods and goddesses. But Constantine had this evil thought in mind. If you go through his biography, he was a horrible man in personal life too. And so he sought to use Christianity in order to unify brutally the Christian empire. Next, please. And so in 312 AD, the Edict of Milan, Constantine declares toleration of Christianity, which means that for the first time he allows Christian priests to preach Christianity, to spread Bible, to make churches all over the Christian empire. So you might think, as many Hindus today argue, what is the harm in, because we are the lenient liberal ones. So what is the harm in letting Christianity spread? This is the point where the destruction of ancient Roman pagan religion starts. By the point, as soon as Constantine starts tolerating Christianity, Christianity starts spreading, destroying paganism. Next, please. In 332, in 312, he tolerates Christianity. And so in 20 years, Christianity spreads through churches, through secret destructions of pagan temples, gods and goddesses, through conversion by fraud. In 20 years, it spreads, becomes big, and it becomes a big enough force so that Constantine makes it a state religion. Now, this is a new phenomenon. There never used to be state religions as such, that in which one sect is protected. Of course, sects were protected, gods and goddesses, their cults were protected, but not to the exclusion of other cults and of other gods and other temples and other sects. But for the first time in 332 AD, Christianity becomes a state religion. And as soon as it becomes a state religion, forced conversions of its population starts through the agency, through the help of Roman soldiers. So by military power, religion is the ancient pagan religion of Roman Empire is now destroyed, and the help of military, help of state troops is used. Next, please. And look, in a span of less than 50 years, the destruction of ancient pagan religion is almost completely achieved. In 50 years, Christianity becomes so big that in 381 AD, Emperor Theodosius bans paganism. So here is the trajectory. They use the democracy and liberalism of a pagan society, dharmic society. They ask for toleration of an intolerant ideology like Christianity. Once it is so-called tolerated, it grows rapidly by destroying other sects and by exploiting the fault lines of the native ancient pagan dharmic society. And once it gains state power, once it gains military, political power, it actively destroys the very same pagan dharmic culture and religion which allowed Christianity to function. This is the trajectory. So pagan thinking and philosophy are banned. In the recent, extremely brilliant book of Catherine Nixie, where she narrates the entire history of very painful history of the Roman Empire and Greece and Rome, where after the success of Christianity, how pagan philosophers were hounded out, they were killed, their temples were destroyed. How beautiful a sculpture, this broken sculpture here is a testimony to that. Just like Islamic destruction happened in India, Christian destruction happened in ancient Europe, and they destroyed the deities and the gods and goddesses and temples of ancient pagan sects, and they forced these few philosophers to flee to other countries. And very soon, it's very natural that most of them, all of them, were destroyed very soon, because they could not find any other country nearby to live in where they could prosper and where their religion, their sects, their philosophy could also prosper. So in 381, Theodosius bans paganism. Next, please. And pagan in 392, there is state edict of destroying the pagan shrines, pagan temples. Every diptych of a priestess of Ceres, this depicts, is still in fully classical style. The idol was defaced and thrown in a well. Pagan worship, even in private, was banned, and pagan worshippers were executed. So it is not enough that the temples are destroyed. Today we are thinking that it's a public matter, not a private matter, but they will come inside our bedrooms, inside our puja rooms, once they gain enough power, enough population, once they change enough demography in India. Next, please. So this is the trajectory to go over it again. How they use democracy, pluralism, liberalism, and how a militant minority like Christian ideology uses it to destroy the same democracy. So in 310, Christianity is banned because of their obviously obnoxious practices of throwing hatred against other religions and other sects. In 312, Christianity is allowed because Constantine is thinking of using Christianity. In 332, within a span of 20 years, it grows so big at the expense of others through fraud and other means that it becomes a state religion. As soon as it becomes a state religion, it starts destroying the same democracy which allowed Christianity to become the state religion. And you can see the same trajectory everywhere, and also during the 20th century in Europe, where Hitler and his Nazi party, they did not come to power in a coup. They were elected. So they fought elections. They were elected to the German parliament, whatever it is called. And after they destroyed the same democratic process. They destroyed other parties, banned other parties, and they did what they did. They did a genocide of Jews and killed many other millions. So Christianity, this is a leaf directly out of a Christian playbook, directly out of a biblical playbook. This is how they function. So what Hitler did was very much in keeping with what Christianity did in ancient Europe. Next, please. So after destroying democracy, they banned paganism. Destruction of pagan temples starts. We can see the ruins of these pagan temples all over Europe. Public demolition of temples. And then there are descriptions of how wholeheartedly, how in public ceremonies, they would deface the statues of Roman goddesses. They would defile these statues in horrible, horrible practices, destroy the temples. If there were any pagan priests left, they would kill them, lynch them in public, and make a public spectacle, so any secret pagans would not dare to follow with their ancestral religion. They would also convert to Christianity. Next, please. You shall have no other gods before me, and their inspiration is directly from the Bible, Exodus. So it is not like these are some fanatics. These are the most authentic believers of Christianity, the most authentic Christians who do this. Today, the Christians in Europe that you see who are not much concerned with Christianity, they are not authentic Christians, of course. So we cannot take what Christianity is by taking to what 90% of the population in Europe has become. Next, please. And similar other passages in Bible which command, this is the Parthenon in Greece. It was a beautiful, very beautiful temple, beyond description even. And this is what their archaeological department has resurrected. It was completely destroyed. Of course, there is no statue of the goddess and the gods, and the what we call as Garbhagriha is large gone. This is just the hall. Next, please. And the victory of Christianity is what led to the onset of Dark Ages. We will understand how. In other countries nearby in Europe, what they were doing was equally or even more horrible. I consider the onset of Dark Ages, which is also the thought of many other scholars. In early 5th century, the murder of Hypatia, the great librarian of Alexandria, by then a largely pagan city, as the onset of Dark Ages. She was a great pagan mathematician living in Alexandria in what is now Egypt. She was, of course, pagan and not a Christian. By then, Christianity had won over, of course, the Roman Empire, and Alexandria was part of the Roman Empire. And there too, they were growing. Christian churches were growing. Christian fathers were growing. But Hypatia, in the pagan society, women were free to become mathematicians. They were free to study. They could become great librarians, great scholars, and to gain great status in society. She was such a brilliant woman that it is said that she was not only very beautiful, she was very scholarly, very erudite, and she would go to the library daily in a beautiful chariot herself, which she rode herself. So it was a society which allowed women such freedom and such respect. An entire pagan society saw her with great respect because, of course, she represented knowledge, beauty, and all the good aspects of a culture and civilization. And we will see what Christians did to her. Next, please. She was not just murdered by Christian fanatics in 415 AD. She was then molested, disrobed, all her clothes were torn. She was lynched to death on public square by Christian fathers because she, uh, quote unquote, worshipped false gods. And as a woman, she dared to become a philosopher. She disrobed her and maybe did various other atrocities to her. And then, after killing her, dismembered her body in various small pieces and threw it in all corners of the that same public square. And after that, they burned the library of Alexandria. So this is what Christianity, in essence, is, because it hates knowledge. And I'm not just saying this because of their history. Actually, they claim that Bible contains all metaphysical and all physical knowledge that is to be gained. So anyone who tries to gain knowledge outside the Bible is an evil person. He is doing with the inspiration of Satan, of devil. And that is why they have to destroy not just those people who study it, but all the books, all the philosophy. And so they burned Alexandria, the ancient library of Alexandria. We cannot even imagine the sort of horrible crime that was. It is said that it contained more than 20 to 30,000 of manuscripts. So in an ancient world, 2000, almost 2,000 years ago, a library containing thousands and thousands of manuscripts getting destroyed like this, you can say that a lot of wisdom of the ancient pagan world was forever lost when this library was burned. This is the state of crime that they commit. Next, please. And so, bit by bit, from 4th to 6th century, you can say in 4th century, the dark blue areas are Christian. You can see the patches because they started taking over the cities first, and then the capitals of great nations and countries that existed. Then they started by 6th century. They had largely covered what is now France, Italy, Spain, and Britain. Next, please. Then southern Germany was converted in 6th to 8th century. And we will be surprised to know that northern Germany, what is now a very Christian country of Europe, northern Germany was converted only in 12th century, 800 years ago. It held out till a very long time. Next, please. Then Austria-Hungary and Czechoslovakia, 8th to 10th century. Next, please. Bulgaria in 10th to 12th century. Bulgaria, which is now a very important country of Eastern Europe. And this is a scene where Preslav Fort, the fort of Bulgaria, is being baptized. And it remained pagan as long as 12th century. Next, please. Poland in 10th to 13th century. Poland, which is now a very fundamentalist Catholic country, it became Christian very late. And its neighboring country of Lithuania, it was converted only in 16th century. So you can see that great pagan kingdoms lasted until 16th century in Europe. But the progression of Christianity in these areas was unstoppable, and they destroyed all paganism, ancient paganism in Europe. Next, please. Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine were converted in 10th century. Vladimir, their king, was also hunting for a religion, and he was equally open to convert to Islam. For him, for politicians, this was religion, like prophetic monotheism, was a way to quell rebellions, way to unify their empire in one thread. And he was open to Jews, he invited the Muslims and Jews and Christians, and he was very open to convert to Islam, but because Islam didn't allow drinking, and Russians, as we know, even now, that they cannot live without drinking, so he rejected Islam and accepted Christianity, because in Christianity it is a very central ritual, even in church proceedings. So this is how Russia converted, and after that it's a neighboring countries. Next, please. Scandinavia in 12th century, in some of the tribes of northern Scandinavia, northern Sweden, remained pagan as late as 18th century. But you can see the perseverance of Christianity, that no matter how late it is, no matter how many centuries have passed, they will still try to convert, because their goal of converting whole of the world to Christianity is still in their sight. It is very central to them. Next, please. And the Baltics, as we discussed in up till 14th and 15th century, except Lithuania. Next, please. Which only in 15th century became Christian. Next, please. And this is another map of the expansion of Christianity. Next. So now what happened? Because many so-called woke and uber liberal people would ask, so what? So what if it converted to Christianity? So here we will discuss some important markers. What happens when Christianity wins and a pagan dharmic sect loses? So we will compare Rome and Rome versus Jerusalem. Rome means the pagan Rome and Jerusalem. So pagan worldview versus Judeo-Christian worldview. Next, please. First of all, end of religious freedom. As soon as Christianity wins, it is goodbye to all so-called religious freedom, tolerance, secularism, because according to their holy book, all other religions are false religions to be eliminated. So, of course, all religious freedom is gone. And by this, it is not just meant that you are not allowed in public to worship your ancestral religion. You will be forced to do that in private life too. Next, please. End of knowledge, because they think that Bible is the sole fount of knowledge, and so anything outside Bible is the inspiration of the devil. We will see how they also persecuted not just philosophers but scientists in the later era. Next. End of science, because science is knowledge, and as Bible is from God for them and science is from Satan, because science tells them to eat the forbidden fruit of knowledge, which is not allowed to us puny humans. Next, please. End of democracy, pluralism, of course, because when the kingdom of heaven has arrived, which means if Christianity wins and becomes a state religion, that is the kingdom of heaven. So, of course, it means that there is no freedom of expression. You have to praise Christianity and you have to keep quiet about everything else. Next. End of respect for women. Bible says that this is a very vast topic, so I won't go deeply into it. But woman is an afterthought of man. She was made on the seventh day when Adam was bored. So Eve was created out of the rib of Adam for his entertainment, and that's how the Bible sees women. That's how the church and historically Christians have seen women. And it is the beginning of institutionalized misogyny. This is very important. We have various societies have treated different women differently. Our society also has a very different idea of men and women, but that's completely different. Our central idea is that of justice. We do not operate on the idea of equality, but on the idea of justice. But that does not mean we disrespect women. In society, it happens again and again. In society, various injustices happen. But our scriptures are darshan, because we teach that all is one, that we, all of us, are God's God who has forgotten himself, the supreme consciousness, which has forgotten itself and has become many from one. So there is no question of differentiating between man and women. Of course, in society, lots of bad things happen. But institutionalized misogyny, institutionalized hatred of women, it started with Christianity when they embedded certain, you can say, certain disadvantages or institutional disadvantages against women in Christian, and not just in religion, but also in state and society. And end of sports, this is very extremely important. Olympics was started in 20th century, or in I think the last decade of 19th century, because after Christianity won, it thought that sports was vulgar, because most of the athletes they couldn't wear a lot of clothes, and women also participated in a few sports, and lots of men participated, and they thought that it was vulgar. So Theodosius, when banned Olympics in 393 AD, he destroyed the temples that were built to create the gods, Olympian gods, and he destroyed all the sports, because he thought that it is a pagan culture and practice which is font of all sorts of infidelity, all sorts of lascivious behavior. This is how Christianity viewed sports. So end of the sports too. Next, please. End of medicine. Now, if you read English literature or any other important European literature of medieval ages and early modern era, you will find a very curious practice of bloodletting. This never existed in India. So when I started reading their literature, I was very intrigued because whenever somebody would fall ill and when he would run temperature, they thought that just by cutting a vein and letting out a lot of blood would cure him. This was a central way. This is not a stray practice. This is described in Jane Austen's works. This is described in Charles Dickens' works. This is described in Leo Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. It was very established Christian medical practice. Whenever somebody would fall ill, they would just cut a vein and took out sometimes as much as half a bucket of blood, which would, as you can judge, which would kill half of the people and never cured anyone. So they banned medicine because they thought that women who practiced this, actually it was mostly women who practiced the local systems of medicine, who were experts in gathering herbs, because in ancient system, men were generally about hunting and different outside activities. Women would gather all of this food and herbs and medicines, and so they were very good at identifying what root or what part of an animal would cure someone. And so they were generally the, you can say, the village vaidyas or the village doctors. And so in order to suppress them, because they were not willing to abandon religion as such, so their ancient pagan religion as such. And so because to suppress them, the ancient medicinal practices were all banned. And it is said that if you are ill, that is a suffering sent by God to cure you. And so you should suffer and suffer more so you can be nearer to Jesus Christ. And this is what they work. You can find this all over European literature. Next, please. End of hygiene. If you read the accounts of various Christian monks, and I'm not once again not taking example of stray Christian monks, but important sects like Dominicans, Cistercians, Jesuits, and various other most important Christian monastic sects. They believe that bathing daily is a practice, a pagan practice, not a Christian practice. That because at that time most of these are cold countries, so there were public baths, and going to public bath for a Christian would mean exposing yourself to others, and that for a Christian was considered licentious and sinful. And so bathing was banned because in cold countries in northern Germany, most of the year you cannot just take bath in the open; you will die of exposure. So they have this culture of public baths, which is not frequent in India because everyone can take ablutions at their home. But in Europe, this was the culture. In most of the cold countries, this is the culture. And so all of this public bathing was banned. And when bathing was banned, a lot of different myths arose around living in dirt and living in quite squalor, because it is thought that monks were closer to God when they did not pay attention to their body by not bathing, by not doing any of these things, by torching their body, they would be closer to God. Next, please. And this led to a lot of heresies over the century, because the suppression was so great that, as you saw, this is what changes in a society. All of us will be affected by a Christian country, because it would not just affect our public lives. If that is not enough, it will impact our private lives. And when you suppress so much, a lot of heresies. Heresy is what in Christianity, there is one central belief, one story. If you deviate even a little from it, then you become a heretic. Heretic is one who does not follow Christianity very well. And all through the history of Christianity, heresies were persecuted. Next, please. So what did change? What changed in religion and politics, really? Next, please. Paganism, in regard to ultimate spirituality, is oriented inward. There are lots of social practices, but when a person is spiritually, he progresses, then he turns inside instead of turning outward towards the world. Salvation is inside. Salvation is not in this world. Salvation is not in samsara. Salvation is not outside, somewhere in some book or some place. Salvation is inside us. Self-realization is inside us. Next, please. But for Christianity, whenever a person becomes more Christian, he becomes even more outward oriented because he has to convert everyone else. Because for him, the only means to attain salvation is by the fact that everyone else is converted to Christianity. And so he has to go out and convert others for his own salvation. This is their theology. That's why Christian priests and missionaries, their agendas are so violent, their methods are so violent, so full of fraud and violence, because they want to very quickly convert all of. We are delaying by living as Hindus and by dying as Hindus, we are delaying their salvation. So we are directly in their path. Christianity is a train and we are standing on their track. So we have to be eliminated if they want to go to the destination of Christian salvation. For them, salvation is not enough. Converting everyone else is necessary. Personal salvation is not enough, as we discussed. Next, please. Before Christianity, religion and politics were not the same. Of course, dharma, or as we understand dharma, it informed politics and every aspect of human life. But in Christianity, they become one and the same. You can see it in the organization of Christianity. When it took over Roman Empire, just mirroring the divisions, political divisions and political provinces of Roman Empire. Similarly, church had these archdioceses, then dioceses, then cathedrals, then churches, then chapels, and similar posts mirroring the Roman administrative setup were also invented in Christianity. So Christianity made religion and politics one and the same. Everything is a means of politics and thus religion. So universities and colleges would try to convert their children and try to create church fathers and missionaries and priests, and so would the media do, so would their politics do, and so would their society. So everything is a tool for politics and religion. The state also became the tool of religion. Christianity used Constantine. Constantine thought that he was a clever man. He was using Christianity, but actually Christianity used Constantine. This we have to understand. Politicians think they are very clever, that they can use Christianity and Islam. No, and in the end, it is actually Islam and Christianity which end up using these politicians and politics. And this is what happened in the ancient Roman Empire. Next, please. Christianity was extremely victorious until Islam came, another ideology. This is not the place to go into what Islam is. Just to tell you one thing, that for Islam, Quran was the holy book. It continued most of the things that Christianity did, but it added the proselytization like Christianity. Conversion is also in Islam. It is also a central character of Islam. But for Islam, Quran is also the book. For Christians, what happened? New Testament directly is not the law. They accept the Old Testament law, but then through churches and canons and bulls, they created various civil secular laws. And so over the centuries, it was possible, much easier in Christian countries to create secular laws than in Islamic countries, where Quran is the law book, and it's very hard to institute any other law. Right now, what's happening in Afghanistan, and even before Taliban came, the state law was the Sharia law. So it didn't matter whether Taliban ruled or any other society ruled. A woman could still be punished for not wearing a hijab. A woman could still be stoned to death for committing adultery or for trying to educate her children. So this was the difference with Islam. And Islam, as soon as it came on scene, it started winning a lot of countries and nations. And a rival of Christianity emerged. Next, please. This made Christians doubt themselves. How could God's army lose? Until this point, God's army was winning, but then Islam came and they started losing. So how could God's army lose? So their theology quickly adjusted. They said that Satan was sabotaging God's work. So wherever Christianity lost, it was Satan's work. It was corrupting Christendom from within. It was said that the Christians that existed in Europe, they were not pure Christians. They were not following Christianity very well. And so this remnant paganism, residual paganism within them has to be cleansed. They have to be, if they are not Christian enough, they have to be killed so that Christianity can once and for all triumph completely. So you understand that the violence is not done when all of us are converted to Christianity. Then they turn on the Christians themselves. Then they start finding who is not Christian enough, and more radical and fundamentalist versions arrive. Like in Afghanistan, they have been completely Islamic for many centuries now. Then why is there all the violence, still all the violence that is residual there? Because they find that someone is not Islamic enough. And similar is true about Christianity. Excuse me, just I'll take a sip of water.
Sure, please.
They said that the devil had companions. He made various Christians as tools. And who were these tools? This is very important because we are coming to the most important part of our presentation today. Next, please. Heretics, Jews, and witches. Pagans were all gone. So heretics is one who is not Christian enough, or in secret who has abandoned Christianity and is following some demonic religion. Jews, of course, because right in front of their eyes there were people who were not Christians, who were also not pagans, but who were not Christians. And so Jews were evil, and witches. And witches were simply any woman who tried to use some local drug, who tried to do any local method, use any local method in education, in medicine, in anything else. Next, please. Pagans disappear, but now internal persecution starts. This brings us to Inquisition. We'll briefly discuss what Inquisition was and what three important phases were in the history of Inquisition, because very importantly, the Third Inquisition was never formally ended. The Vatican still hasn't ended the Third Inquisition. It still goes on. So we'll learn about that. The fight against the heretics. Next, please. Inquisition was a mobile institution. It means that they were a group of people who would travel from one place to another. Just like ghost hunters, anyone who has watched some modern Hollywood series like Supernatural and like Grimm, where there are these people who hunt monsters. They are monsters of nothing but distortions of pagan gods and goddesses. And just in the image of the holy inquisitors of the past, they try to hunt these monsters. So these were a mobile group of people, 10, 12 people, some Christian fathers, Christian priests, who would go to any place where it was reported, quote unquote, that there were some witchcraft was reported. They would go there and they would persecute people there. Next, please. There were three main inquisitions. First, the medieval Inquisition, which started in 12th century, continued till 15th. Then the Spanish Inquisition, which was the most horrible of all, which started in 1478 and ended in, look, more than around 350 years it lasted, 1834. And third, the Roman Inquisition, which started in parallel in Italy, which started in 1542 and still hasn't ended. And we will know what it has become. Next. The medieval Inquisition, papal bull says of Pope Lucius III, for the purpose of doing away with. The very name was the purpose of doing away with. So it means that eliminating the heretics. Anyone who is not a Christian enough is a heretic. These are some scenes. We will go in them deeper later on. Yes, next please. These were staffed mainly by Dominicans, Christian monks. These are fanatic Christians and were travelers. They had no homes. They had left their homes. They were wandering monks. They would live in this monastery or that monastery. Their entire job was to hunt out heretics to kill them. Next, please. These are not some fringe groups. These are actually one of the most central groups of Christianity, which are still very powerful. The heretical groups. Next, please. And who were the heretics? There were Cathar heretics in Spain and France, who doubted biblical creation, who considered Jesus an angel and not a god. who rejected transubstantiation is when the mass is spoken in a church, when a prayer takes place in a church, it is said that the bread and the wine that you drink while the ritual is going on, bread literally becomes the body of Christ and wine becomes the blood of Christ. And so it is said that Christianity practices the greatest ritual cannibalism all over the world. And you are supposed to eat the body of Christ and drink the blood of Christ. Every Christian, whenever the Mass is held, this is literally what it is. And to not believe in this literally means that you are a heretic. And so those who said that this is not literally true, they just merely said this is symbolic, this is metaphoric. They were considered heretics and they were killed. And some of them were strict celibates, some of them were vegetarians. Now, this is a great crime in a Christian ruled country where vegetarianism is considered a great sin. Next, please. In 1208, Pope Innocent III declared war on heretics, and 20,000 Christian soldiers attacked on these Cathar heretics. And there was a great genocide of Cathars, and as a sect, Cathars were forever destroyed. Next, please. When they stormed this famous fortress, and the story is still told again and again, they were not sure when they were storming the fortress. So they asked the Pope that how can we differentiate who is a heretic and who is a Christian? And he replied, kill them all. God will know his own. So this is how they operated against their enemies. Next, please. Then there were Beguines, Amalricans, various Waldensians. Its history, we need to go much deeper into it to know it. But here I'm just taking their names. Next, please. Because the inspiration is in the Bible. He who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death. So Bible allows killing even those Christians who have committed heresy. Next, please. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest Christian fathers, he said, if ordinary criminals are justly doomed to death, much more may heretics be justly slain. Here is a very important paradigm shift. Before that, people judged individuals on their individual actions before Christianity. So someone committed rape or murder, then he's a great criminal. But here, a thought crime, a religious political crime is much worse than an ordinary crime. So if you committed genocide, that's okay, but you cannot commit heresy. This is a paradigm shift in the consciousness, in common consciousness of people. Next, please. What was the procedure of these inquisitors of Inquisition? That we will see. Next, please. This is the, you can say, the flow chart. First, there was investigation, then trial, then torture, and at last, punishment. So you would say, what's wrong with investigation and trial? We'll see what's wrong with it. But it led to torture and that punishment. First step in investigation. Inquisitor would gather townspeople and he will declare that heretics are and witches and heretics, I command them to declare themselves and I will be lenient on them if they declare on their own. But if not, then I will find them out. Next. Declares a period of grace where anyone can declare himself to confess their crime and also to denounce others. Because generally entire villages and towns were punished if nobody came, because in the beginning nobody came forward, because who would come forward to get punished or get tortured or killed? So entire villages were punished. So then they encouraged the villagers to report on others. And because most of these were imaginary crimes, they were like having sex with the devil or just playing sort of mantra on someone else, and crimes like these, imaginary crimes like this. So anyone could report anything about anyone. So people generally took out their local animosities, local fault lines. Next, please. Then there was trial. Now anyone could be accused without proof because it was God's crime. So they didn't need any proof. The investigation and trial weren't such legal processes. Confessing in full was the best hope. So if you are confessed in full, then In rare cases, you might not be killed, but in most cases, you will be killed without much torture. And then testimony in secret of murderers and rapists was accepted. So even if you're a great criminal, you could go to these inquisitors and confess about others, that what others were doing. So if generally somebody confessed about himself or herself, they would report at least on 10, 20 other people. And just like various other legal systems now, their punishment would be lesser if they reported on other people. Next. Then the torture was, of course, a very important part, and we'll go through it. Pope Innocent IV allowed use of torture was allowed. Next, please. Punishment was wearing a yellow cross for life, banishment, life in prison, life in galleys, and also killing on a stake. Next, please. Or burning alive at stake. The final punishment was burning alive at stake. If you can go to the previous slide to just have a look. So people would not be killed before burning them. On town square, like in Afghanistan and various Islamic countries, on squares, there are hand cutting squares where thieves are punished by cutting off their hands. So in these Christian countries, there will be public squares where people would be burned to death alive. Next, please. Now the Spanish Inquisition, in which they really took it to another level. Arise, O God, judge your own cause. Next, please. The groups persecuted were converted Jews who were recently converted to Christianity, but they were not trusted. It was thought that they were not Christian enough. Protestants, or another sect of Christianity, and the Protestants replied in same. They had not Inquisition, but pogroms and genocides against the Catholics, and then witches and homosexuals. Now most of these groups they try to vilify Hindu Dharma and Hindu society by saying that these traditional society they persecute, stereotype homosexuals. Actually, ours is a society which has been very accommodating of them, never punishing them, and also not making it the value system of the entire society, but incorporating them in society. In temple ecosystem, they were incorporated a lot. So ours is a society who has been the most lenient to them. These were the people who would burn homosexuals alive. And they are now preaching, they are now creating an environment in which they think that they can vilify the name of Hindu Dharma and society by adopting these fashionable new movements. Next, please. The background was that Spain was reconquered from Islamic armies. So the zeal of reconverting and then bringing them back to Christianity was very much. Next, please. The hatred of Jews remained there because they blamed them from killing Jesus Christ. Next. Saint Gregory, the great Pope, called Jews slayers of the Lord, murderers of the prophets, adversaries of God. Next, please. Saint Jerome, and these are one of the most hallowed saints, and they use the word vipers, cursors of Christians about Jews. Next, please. Saint Ambrose, doctor of the church. Doctor is a very big post because they are very important persons who create, mold theology, interpret theology. Who cares if a synagogue, home of insanity and unbelief, is destroyed? So here again, when a synagogue is to be destroyed, it's a good thing. Next, please. And they had to wear a badge of shame. They had to wear yellow just because they were Jews once. They had to wear these badges so they can be identified anywhere in market. Hitler, and this comparison cannot be enough made. Hitler also forced Jews to wear distinctive clothing so they can be marked in public. His hatred of Jews was a direct descendant of anti-Semitism, which is the hatred of Jews in Christianity. Next, please. They were accused of blood libel and forced nailing. These are just imaginary crimes. Blood libel is like blood sacrifice, in which Christian children. They were accused of stealing Christian children. Jews were accused of stealing Christian children and sacrificing infants, Christian infants, in secret for their own ceremony. So they just completely imagined it. And then host nailing is a similar ceremony. We'll go through it. Next, please. Jews were charged of ritually sacrificing Christian children and drinking their blood. Completely imaginary accounts were created. Paintings were made. Sculpture was created. Next, please. There are paintings in churches which depict blood libel. A pilgrimage business was created out of it. So all the pilgrims would be made to show these paintings. They would be made to donate for the Christian cause because the evil Jews were sacrificing Christian children and friends. Next, please. Just like they are doing to Brahmins and Hindus. Brahmins are their primary target, but the entire Hindu society is. So the similar thing they did to Jews. In 1934, Hitler's newspaper said published similar paintings of blood libel. And taking a leaf directly out of this Christian Inquisition, Hitler would publish these pamphlets of sacrificing common men in secret Jewish ceremonies. Next, please. Host nailing, taking sacred wafers and mutilating them. This was ridiculous. It was said that sacred wafers and sacred breads were of churches were stolen, and in secret they were nailed and mutilated, and so prominent Christians would die, just like the voodoo rumors today, where the dolls are tortured so that someone far away dies. So similarly, all of these things were all of these crimes were imagined about Jews. Next, please. Driving nails through them to crucify Jesus again. So they were accused of they are trying to crucify Jesus again. Next, please. Crypto Jews were those who had converted to Christianity, but they were imagined that secretly they were Jews, and the procedure was the same to torture them. Next, please. The punishments were wearing humiliating dresses, exiled to a hostile country, annexing all of their property, condemned to galleys, and burning at the stake. And as the Inquisition became quicker and quicker, burning at the stake increased. Very few survived the investigation because the very process of torture was great. Next, please. Mass burnings were called as autos da fe, in which not just one, but hundreds and tens and hundreds of these pagans, Jews, witches, women were publicly burned. And these were public spectacles. The whole town would gather to watch people burn to death alive. Next, please. This is a way of brutalizing, like the modern Qurbani rituals, where the whole town is forced to watch in certain Islamic fundamentalist countries. So they are brutalized to a point where they can do this to humans. And so this is how the country people were made to participate. These were conducted at large public spaces on holidays so that everyone would be attending. It was like vacation. Next, please. And generally Catholic mass, prayers, and public procession would be taken out. Then sentences would be read out. And then audience would be seated. Great speeches would be made. And then people would be burned to death. So quite theatrical also. Next, please. At least 5,000 were killed in the first few years. Some places 90 to 100% were converts. So earlier who were Jews who had converted but who were not trusted enough. Next, please. In Spain only. And many were sent to galleys on ships, living a very hard life where they would average life was just 1 year. The conditions were so bad. So it was just as killing them on the stake. Next, please. Around in the Spanish Inquisition, 150,000 were tried. Around 10,000 were executed, and the rest went to galley where everyone died. So almost 150,000 were directly killed in the Spanish Inquisition. Next, please. And they made many new innovations in torture, and we'll see what they did. Next, please. This is what they did. Instruments of Christ, sadistic torture tools. They not just imagined, but created, innovated devices of torture, which were specific to their sort of charges and crimes. So we'll go through them one by one. Next, please. The thumb screw. So, as the name says, it would be adjusted around one's fingers or one's thumb, and then it would be fastened, and also around the head, and there would be spikes in it. So, just to torture someone more than this. Next, shin crusher. So, this would be adjusted around. One would be seated in a non-Christian or someone accused of heresy in Christianity. His head would be seated on a chair. His head would be fitted in this machine, and you can see the uh, rotating device on the top. So they would screw it more and more so that the bones of jaw would be crushed or they would be broken. Head crusher and shin crusher. Ear cutting set, so it is self-explanatory. Adjust it and cut it. Next, the stocks for burning feet. So this wooden device would be attached to one's feet, and then scalding hot water or oil would be poured on feet while interrogating someone for inquisition. Next, a Spanish boot, collar, and chair. So in boot, someone would be made to wear this iron boot, and then hot oil would be poured in it. This collar would be fastened around one's neck, and this chair, one would be forced to sit on this chair while one is suffering through this. Questions would be asked to him. So you can imagine that everyone would confess any sort of crime that you imagine for them. Next, please. Iron mask with a funnel for pouring hot oil. This would be fastened on someone's face, and oil would be poured so that it goes straight into your throat and into your stomach, burning you from the inside, so that you die a horrible death after a few days. Next, this is rack where someone is fastened, and you can see the devices that it is strengthened and strengthened until your bones break, until your limbs are pulled apart. First, the bones break from inside, then the skin is crushed. It is necessary for us to see all of this because this is what they will still do. And in many ways, Inquisition is still continuing. Goa Inquisition, they did this to Hindus. It's not that Hindus were not at the receiving end of this. They did this in Goa, in our own country, on our own shores. Goa is now marketed as a place for fun and frolic, but this is their Catholic history. So it's very necessary that we all go through this. This is called the rack. This was a very famous instrument. Next. Breaking wheel. So someone would be fastened on this and the wheel would be made to go over them. And in the second variety, one would be fastened with limbs hanging. And then like a person on the right, you can see, a person would beat these limbs until they are broken. Next, please. The ladder and the rack. So you can see one would be tied on the upper. These would be sliding bars, and one would slid down, and then they would be pulled downwards. So various innovative methods of torturing someone. Next, burning at the wheel. So just like we non-vegetarian slow roast of pig, which is of course a dead animal by then. So an alive man or woman would be tied on a wheel and slowly roasted. First he will be burned a little, then they will take him away from the fire and interrogate him, torture him more, stay for a few hours, then roast him again. And this is how they will slow roast a person to death. Next, quartering machine. So your limbs are pulled in different directions. So your hands and feet are pulled away from your body, broken from your body. Next, please. Judas cradle. So you can see a very pointed structure, your stool, you are made to sit on it. Not only are you hung from above, not only are your limbs pulled apart, but you are made to sit on this so that your anus is penetrated by this stool and you suffer in that manner. Next, please. This is pendulum. So a great weight is uh, put on one side and a person is put on another. And the more they are pulled, the more weight they put on it, the more they are tortured, and slowly their limbs are torn apart. Next. Heretics fork. So this, they are made to wear like this. If they try to even adjust their head just a little, it pierces their jaw. Next. Breast stripper. Now they had special tools for women. So because they were accused of committing sin by their body. So this spider and this breast stripper, and they are self-explanatory. What would they do? This was especially for women. And the last, the pair of anguish. This is, you can imagine, this is an actual instrument which is still in museums in Europe, and this is an actual photograph. This is a pair of anguish. It would be inserted in the vaginas of women, and it had an exploding device where it would open inside, so giving maximum amount of pain and torture inflicting them upon them. So this is what they did. These were the tools that they used. This is all their recorded history. So when Hindus ask, what do we stand to lose? What if we convert to Christianity? This is what happens. The Iron Maiden, a woman would be made to fit inside this, and Virgin of Nuremberg, and different tools would be used on Dortmund. Next, please. And the Portuguese Inquisition was the same like Spanish. It also lasted. So these were the tools. Now, just quickly ending the presentation. Next, please. Goa Inquisition. All of these things happened in India, and such a small state of Goa. It is still a very small state, population-wise, or population-wise or area-wise. Yeah, area-wise, the smallest of India. And 16,202 Indians were tried, 1 auto da fe happened, and thousands were killed. So all of this happened in India. All of this has happened to Hindus. Next, please. Because India was given to Portugal, this is how they decide. Half of the world was given to Spain, half of the world was given to Portugal, and so Portuguese came to India and did this. Next, please. So they annex Goa, they convert some of these people to Christianity. They're soon accused, of course, of heresy, and this is how they are tried. Next, please. Now, Saint Xavier, he requested for the Inquisition in Goa. So he's called as Saint Xavier. There are schools by this horrible monster's name all over India. He is revered as a saint. India's political leaders wish Christians on his death or birth anniversary, calling him a saint. He is canonized in church. He tortured, personally recommended Inquisition to be there in India. He personally ordered his soldiers to kill various Hindus. He was actually a man who instituted genocide of Hindus in India. And such is the state of Indian academia and media that he is celebrated as a saint who killed native people. And while they topple the statues of Columbus in America, they are very happy that an invader's statues are toppled. But still, they would recommend to worship Saint Xavier and continue his work in Andhra Pradesh and various other states of India. Next, please. Goa Inquisition was nefarious, fiendish, lustful, corrupt religious order, which pounced on Goa for the purpose of destroying paganism, that is Hinduism, and introducing the true religion of Christ. So, historian himself says. Next, please. Roman Inquisition has still not formally ended. Next. It was instituted in the Vatican. Next. And the persecuted crimes of heresy, Protestantism, sorcery, immorality, blasphemy, Judaizing, witchcraft. Next. But its most important focus was banning anti-church books. This Inquisition's focus was to punish knowledge. Next. Gutenberg Revolution had flooded Europe with books. The church wanted to control it. Next. An index of forbidden books, 1200 books was taken out. 583 authors were banned. Next. Copernicus, who tried to reinstate heliocentrism, church called it foolish, absurd, and heretical because for them Earth was the center of the universe. Next. Galileo was also punished. We all know these are familiar stories. And he was arrested, had home arrest. And his disciple Bruno was burnt on a stake. Next. 75,000 till cases were tried. 1,500 were burnt at a stake. Next. This is very, very interesting. In 1965, Inquisition changed its name, it didn't end, to Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And its leader recently was the current Pope, who, not the current Pope, the Pope before him, who resigned, Joseph Ratzinger. He was the Grand Inquisitor of the modern era. Next. So, a person who can institute such a corrupt institution, which you saw how the instruments were used, torture were used, he was the supreme authority of the church. So this is not peripheral to Christianity. This is right at its dead center. The witch hunts, we'll in brief go through witch hunts, which was institutionalized misogyny. Women were accused of witchcraft and burned. Next. Pagan world had respect for women, goddesses, there were gods and goddesses all around. Sacred feminine was worshipped. Next. Men were hunters, women were gatherers. With excellent knowledge of herbs. So they were doctors of humanity, as you can see, in ancient pagan world. They instituted many nature-oriented pagan rituals. Subjects like brooms were used. Next. Christianity declared them demons and their temples were broken all over the ancient Roman Empire, ancient countries. Because the Bible says, and this is the New Testament, not just the Old, it is a good thing for a man to have nothing to do with a woman. Saint Peter called women the weaker vessel. Saint Clement called every woman should be filled with shame by the thought that she is a woman. So no crime, just by the dint of their birth. Father Tertullian said that she is the devil's gateway. Aquinas, things changed, they became more sophisticated, but this hatred remained. Nothing defective should have been produced in the first establishment of things. So woman ought not to have been produced then. So he gave a reason why woman was not produced on the first few days. Because she is defective by design, so she was not created earlier. They were labeled as servants of Satan, and all of these paintings were made where they are shown as having sex with the devil and doing all of these crazy ceremonies. And the witch hunts begin. The real cure, they said, that only come from the devil. They even invented these pacts with the devil. So the church fathers would create these documents where witches would sign these pacts with the devil. Devil would also sign. And showing these documents in certain towns and villages, they will start killing witches. The church said those who use herbs for cures did so only through a pact with the devil, either explicit or implicit. Christian charges on witches. We'll go through them. That they destroyed crops, so whenever a crop would be destroyed, women would be blamed. They caused diseases. They would kidnap children and eat them alive. Next. They will, of course, sell their soul to the Satan in various of these very colorful ceremonies. They were in league with the demons. They flew through the air to witches' Sabbath, met in the middle of the night. In every Christian fairy tale, you see there is an evil witch with a cauldron and making an evil brew. Caused male impotence. Of course, they would. Old women and midwives were the greatest target of these people because according to them, they looked evil and they looked like pregnant women. carrier of pagan traditions. They were considered as that, and that's why they were punished. What was the procedure of punishing witches? Let us go through them. The arrest, often without a shred of evidence. Next. The interrogation looking for devil's mark. So any birthmark would be considered devil's mark. And the needles would be stuck, warts and blemishes. So if someone had a wart, that's why it was considered a kiss of the devil. These are actual documents which they kept producing. Next. By ducking the witch, so this is a contraption which near a water body, near a river or a pond. A duck would be, witch would be dug inside water until she died or confessed to her crimes. Swimming the witch, so they would be just thrown in the river. So if they sunk, then it means that they were not witch. So they were happy. Oh, look, she died, but at least it was proved that she was not a witch. If she swam to shore, it proved that she was a witch, and then again she would be killed. So quite a good system of justice, as you can see. Next. The torture was similar to as we tools that we showed in during the Inquisition. After torture, they would admit anything. Next. And their confessions are really colorful. Turning into horses and flying through sky, of turning others into ponies and riding them to witches' meeting, climbing over Christian convents in the form of pigs, and all sorts of such crimes were imagined. This is what they confess. Because, you know, every inquisitor had to take out more and more exotic confessions from them because they had to show their seniors. Just like a traffic policeman, he is told to, you know, make 50 arrests today or make 50 challans today. So he is forced, he has to make those 50 challans. So he will increasingly punish even very gentle people or gentle vehicles driving gently. So this is how they also did. Next. Punishment, of course, was burning at stake. Next. Impalement, which is as the picture shows, just impaling them on a arrow like this. Next. Hanging, of course. Next. Pushing off a bridge, a very common, a very popular method. So every town had a river body, so they would be pushed off a bridge. Pope John 22 authorized investigation of witchcraft 1326, ordered to develop demonology. So demonology, there it was a very authentic church discipline. It was taught in universities. How many kinds of demons are there? What do they do? Next. And how witches converse with them. How to prosecute witchcraft. Then there were manuals how to prosecute witchcraft. Official books published. Next. In 1450, major witch hunts began. Pope Innocent III, full approval of torture was given. And The Hammer of the Witches is a very famous book in which all of this is described, in which even their imaginary crimes, imaginary pacts with the devil are described. Next. All witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. So they are blamed for it. Martin Luther also called for persecution of witches. So it's not like Protestant didn't do it. Next. Luther is called as a reformer, but this is what a reformer did. In Eastern France, Germany, Switzerland, almost 100 years, witches for every public square would have burning witches. Next. This is the origin of Harry Potter because you can see certain references that in medieval times they were burned. And so she wanted to absolve them. She wanted to declare the pagan culture of Europe. And that is how she declared them as good people, as normal people, witches and wizards. This is the origin of that. Trials in which 1,000 were burnt at the stake. In another, various of these trials. Next, please. Next. The Enlightenment ended the madness, but Christianity spread in other continents. And the Dark Ages traveled with them, in Americas too. Next. It was repeated in America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. Next. the two greatest impacts of this this entire sorry story is that religion and politics was intertwined and need for secularism arose, which was distorted. It carried Christianity in many ways. And when it was transposed in countries like India, it distorted Indian society. And religion and science, a dichotomy was created. So science was irreligious or anti-religion. Religion would always be anti-science, which is not the case in dharmic societies like India. It should not be so. So this is where I would like to end. I'm sorry I took so much of time, but because there were so many things to share, so I had to. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pankaj ji. I think firstly we are going to take some time to digest all that information. And thank you so much for giving us your time. Pankaj ji, but before I let you go, I have just one question for you. So having taken a look at all these things, I'm forced to wonder whether they will allow any, the last pagan religion to survive. I mean, these were the medieval times. Definitely, like even you said, that inquisitions are still happening. It's just that, they've changed their methodology, names, etc. But the tools may be different, the mediums might be different. But do you really think that, paganism is definitely, or Hinduism is definitely under threat?
Yes, it is very definitely under threat. They will not allow because their goal is to destroy all other sects on Earth. So they will never allow us to exist. It is entirely up to us whether we choose to fight or not. And they are willing to fight till the very end. They are willing to destroy us completely, not leave a single speck of our existence alone. Because when they rewrite someone's history, they portray us as devils. If you go to Nagaland and interview the people there, they say that we were following we were following demons, we were worshipping demons. So Christianity came and cured us. So they will make even the future generations believe in the Christian myth. So they are not just willing; their end goal is complete destruction of Hindu society and religion and philosophy. Our scriptures, our very way of life, and the very civilization and culture. It is for up to us to fight for our existence.
Correct. I do have a lot of follow-up questions, Pankaj, but I think I'll have to wait for another session with you, because I would want to talk about more contemporary times, the age that we're living in. What is it that they're doing, and what is the solution? Because I still see that there's very little awareness. We're still very happily sleeping. We still believe that all religions preach the same thing, and a lot of other things. I mean, but
Yeah.
definitely our secularism is being taken for granted. But that is
Yeah.
something I think I'll keep for another discussion. So thank you so much, Pankaj ji, for your time. I'm eagerly looking forward to another discussion with you. This was absolutely worth our time, and I'm sure it was worth the time for our audience as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Akshita ji, for inviting me, for giving me this opportunity to deliver this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. Thank you so much, audience, for joining us. So that was the end of our 3-day conference on the Christian fundamentalism. We hope to come back soon with another edition where we are going to have much more discussions at a greater length with some more speakers. Till then, keep following our Twitter handle as well as our YouTube page. We will keep putting up the updates as well as the snippets from this 3-day conference. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.